Think your school day is tough? Try walking 3 miles through the snow, chopping firewood before class even starts, and sharing one single room with every grade from 6-year-olds to teenagers. That wasn't a punishment. That was just a normal Tuesday, 100 years ago. Let's step back in time and see what going to school actually looked like a century ago, because trust me, once you hear this, you'll never complain about your alarm clock again. Back in the 1920s, most American kids didn't go to a big school building with separate classrooms for each grade. Instead, especially if you lived in the countryside, you went to what was called a one-room schoolhouse. Picture one small building, one teacher, and every single grade from 1st through 8th all learning together in the exact same room at the exact same time. As many as 30 or even 40 students could be crammed into that one space, sitting on wooden benches, with the youngest kids up front and the older ones in the back. And there was no school bus waiting outside with air conditioning and comfy seats. Most students simply walked to school, sometimes for miles, in rain, snow, or blazing heat. A few lucky ones got picked up by a horse-drawn wagon, which was basically the world's slowest, coldest school bus. Some families even used that same wagon to deliver the mail on the way. But here's the twist: school didn't even start when you arrived. Before the first lesson, there were chores to do. Someone had to fetch water from the well. Someone had to chop wood and get the stove burning so the classroom wouldn't freeze. The teacher, usually a young, unmarried woman, often showed up an hour early just to light the fire and get everything ready before a single student walked through the door. Once class began, forget laptops, projectors, or even proper notebooks. Most students had exactly one tool, a small chalkboard called a slate. You'd write your spelling words or math problems on it, and when you were done, you'd simply wipe it clean and start again. No paper to spare, no printer, no backpack full of supplies. If your family could afford it, you might have one shared textbook, and that same book might get passed down and reused for years. Learning itself looked completely different too. There was very little discussion, very little group project work, and almost no creative freedom. Instead, school was built entirely around memorization and recitation. You didn't just learn your multiplication tables, you stood up in front of the entire room and recited them out loud from memory, while your classmates and teacher listened. Miss a word, stumble on a date, or forget a line of a poem, and everyone in that room would know it. And discipline back then was nothing like a modern timeout or a strongly worded email home. If you talked out of turn, showed up late, or didn't finish your work, you might be told to stand in the corner, or worse. Corporal punishment, like a smack on the palm with a ruler or a paddle, was completely normal and legally accepted. Teachers had almost total authority, and nobody questioned it. Lunchtime wasn't exactly a treat either. There was no cafeteria, no hot lunch line, no vending machine. Students brought whatever their family could pack, often carried in an old metal pail, which is actually where we get the term lunch pail from. If you were lucky, that might mean bread, a boiled egg, maybe some fruit. If you weren't so lucky, it might just mean whatever was left over from the night before. Now here's something that might really surprise you. Going to school back then wasn't guaranteed, and it definitely wasn't every kid's full-time job the way it is today. Many children were expected to work. During planting season or harvest season, entire classrooms could sit half empty because kids were needed on the family farm instead. In busier towns and cities, some children worked part-time jobs in factories or sold newspapers on street corners just to help support their families. Attendance laws were just barely starting to catch up. So for a lot of kids, school came second to survival. Even the school buildings themselves were nothing like today. Many one-room schoolhouses had no electricity and no indoor plumbing, meaning an outhouse out back instead of a bathroom down the hall, and oil lamps instead of light switches. On a cloudy day, the entire classroom might just be dim because there were no lights to turn on. Heating came from a single wood or coal stove sitting right in the middle of the room, so if you sat too close, you baked, and if you sat too far, you froze. Boys and girls were often treated differently too. In many schools, they were expected to sit on separate sides of the room, use separate entrances, and even play in separate areas during recess. And speaking of recess, sure, kids still got a break to run around outside, but it usually came with a long list of strict rules about behavior, and it definitely wasn't followed by a snack break with juice boxes. There were no school counselors, no sports teams, no drama club, no band practice. Extracurricular activities barely existed. If you wanted entertainment, it usually came from the classroom itself, reciting a poem, performing in a small holiday program, or maybe a simple spelling bee. And yet, despite having so little, one room, one book, one chalkboard, this was the exact system that taught an entire generation how to read, write, and eventually build the modern world we live in today. Many of the people who lived through the Great Depression, fought in World War II, or built the very technology we now depend on every single day, started their education in a tiny one-room schoolhouse just like this. So the next time your Wi-Fi lags during online class, or you're annoyed about carrying a heavy backpack, just remember 100 years ago, kids were walking miles through the snow, chopping firewood before their first lesson, and reciting math problems out loud in front of the entire class on a single shared chalkboard. Which one of these facts shocked you the most? The lunch pails? The corporal punishment? Or the fact that 6-year-olds and teenagers were all learning in the exact same room? Let me know down in the comments. And if this took you back in time, make sure to subscribe, because next, we're going even further back to see what growing up looked like across the world, 1 century at a time.